So my case is about negotiating with uncertainty, and even if it's about Pixar and Disney, it just happened right now. You guys watched Netflix recently, right? Nice. I'm sure you guys seen that there was recently an acquisition of Warner Bros. And when I was reading how this started to take place, I was like, oh, it relates a lot to my capstone, and I was able to see it. I was able to frame it. Sadly, I wasn't able to take pictures, like with the movie stars like Jesse with the rockets, but I saw how it played out, and I found it incredibly interesting because these mergers are only going to keep happening and be more often. As you see right now, companies are acquiring more than ever. Like even after the boom, of the 1980s, it's nothing compared to what we're seeing right now. You think about Meta, acquire Instagram, acquire WhatsApp. It's acquire, and that's the new business model. And this way of acquisition brings us to a huge question: is how much are the companies that we're acquiring worth? I know this is a long intro, but I was practicing right now. And how much are they actually worth? How can you know how much a company is worth? Imagine if our university got acquired, or if we acquired NYU. How much is it worth? What's the actual price? And you could have the best, chief financial officer from everywhere try to decide it, and another huge chief financial officer, and they cannot come to a number. The number is what you negotiate. So the negotiation process is the key part of determining how much the company is worth. And the more that we see this, the more negotiations that we'll have. Okay, so as I was saying about the purpose, is that we definitely need to understand how these mergers will take place. How can you claim value? How can you give value? How to analyze the whole process and the structure? And okay, a quick overview of what we're gonna do right now. I'm gonna be as brief as possible. It's a 200-page paper, but I'll be as brief as possible. So what's the case summary? What's a brief description of what happened with this? So first, Disney is and used to be this massive powerhouse of animation. The biggest player in regards of movies for children, by far. But it got stuck. There was a moment where the movies stopped being as great as they were. I'm sure you guys saw The Lion King and Mulan and Hercules. But after that, what happened? Like, Disney lost these tracks. That's usually what happens to companies. You innovate, you're great, then you die. And it's true, yeah. Like it is what happens. It's a process of innovation. You were great, now your time it's gone. Kind of like MySpace or Blockbusters. And there was other players in town. Shrek appeared and shook the whole world. Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, Toy Story, different types of movies that Disney was not producing, and they started to freak out, saying like, "Oh, we are about to lose everything. These new players are here in town." So what happened? If you cannot beat them, acquire them, and that's what Disney started doing it, and that's what this partnership took place. The main issue is that in the other side of the room, there was this new company that just started, founded by former Apple CEO Steve Jobs, and a bunch of huge names in the animation world, and they were different. They were different about the whole Hollywood franchise, the whole, we need to make as much money as possible. They were like, no, we need to innovate. We need to create. We need to be passionate about everything that we're doing. And that was like a clash. Disney was like, okay, we have big checks. Pixar was like, oh, what about innovation? What about keeping our essence? What about keeping the way we work? And there's where the clashes started to happen. And this clash, it's incredibly powerful because it was not only at one part, It was not only about money. It was not only about keeping the essence alive. It was about autonomy. It was about integration. It was about culture. It was about uncertainty. It was about how do we know that this acquisition will let us be Pixar? How do we know that we're not selling our soul to the devil? And also, how does Disney know that if we're acquiring this company, we're acquiring the innovation, the ideas, the way to create different things, the way to challenge the status quo? How can we do that? And this is where it gets complicated and where it gets fun, is that there's uncertainty in this. You don't know if you're going to be able to match the culture. You don't know if it is a good deal or not. You don't know how much is it worth. How much is it worth to acquire a company that's creating great pictures today, but might not create great pictures tomorrow, or might create the best pictures in the planet Earth? Like, we actually don't know. And there's where the negotiation it's hard. Because if you want to buy this from me, you can go check it out. Like, how much is it worth online, how much something similar worth. You can have a price, but this level of uncertainty, this level of difficulty, how can you value it? And how can you value it whenever there's a power asymmetry that is enormous? Like a company that's existed for 100+ years against these new weights, how that power balances. The way that we analyze this is with, like, I'm sure Amy saw a bunch of them, but we got a huge list of different theories, but I think these ones were the biggest, right? That interest-based bargaining, the gas escalation model, where is it escalating? Because the conflict escalated a lot. And then a lot of behavioral economics, how did they play it out? How did the psyche, the logic of all of the partners played out? And then, the negotiation and strategic frameworks is where it's. But yeah, it made a lot of sense to understand it from how is the conflict escalating. Because at the end of the day, whenever you are acquiring a company, it can break down. They can also sell to other people. There's a lot of tactics that we do not see. There's a lot of pressures that we do not see. In the one that we just saw, like, we think it's chill. Like, Netflix acquired Warner Bros. But there's a lot of other players. There was Paramount trying to push the price up. There was Comcast trying to block the acquisition. There's a bunch of players, and there's a bunch of points of friction that this can escalate. In regards of what we use to understand all of these measurements, we were able to see a bunch of interviews, read different papers, different magazines that were happening about that type. And this is something that it was clear in all the data that I was able to understand, was how this trust building process would be. How can I trust you to manage my company? How can we have the same autonomy? How can also the money be right? We need to make profit. We're a company. What were non-negotiables? And in the mergers and in the acquisitions world, people think that if I buy you, then I buy you with everything. I can do everything that I like, whatever that I want with your company. In this case, there were non-negotiables. There was a strategic vision that they wanted to keep. And something that people kept talking about, it was the power imbalance. This is a couple of the primary actors. I wanted to bring them up, but I'm sure it would be hard to see it, and there's a bunch of actors. But as you see, we have Steve Jobs, who was managing the company. Then we have Bob Iger, which was the CEO of Disney. Now he's been in Disney for forever, but at that time, he was just brought in. He was brand new. Disney had to change their CEO because Jobs was making it so hard for them to get acquired that it need to keep changing and to find a person that was willing to negotiate with Steve. So the negotiation process was so massive that Disney, with its whole power, had to say, hey, CEO, you are not negotiating good. You're doing a bad job. Let's bring somebody new. And at the end, we have the Pixar leadership team and the whole team and the Disney board that were a couple of the primary actors. Now, power dynamics. I don't have the pictures with Steve Jobs, but I have Scar and Nemo. And what is interesting here is that there were ways that this negotiation managed the power dynamics that I think were wonderful. And it resembled a lot of the readings that we saw at Peter Goldman's class. How can you be strong when you're weak? How can you play weak when you're strong? Disney offered different things to say, and appear that, hey, we're this nice company that we actually want to keep your balance, keep your power. Steve, we offer you a seat at the board at Disney. We can make this work. We are nice. And on the other hand, you had Pixar playing it really rough. Like, hey, I'm not negotiating with you. Like, I changed the CEO. I'm not negotiating with him. I don't care. Hey, if you don't buy me, I'm sure, I can make a huge alliance with these other animations, we can make, Nemo appear in Shrek, or we can make these other type of movies that would actually destroy you. So it's either, like we find a common ground, or we're fighting back to the end. And this what it allowed for it to work. This part is key. What the movies that we're seeing right now. What's a movie about the feelings? I don't know the name in English. Inside Out. Yeah, like movies like that are becoming hits and hits and hits. It's because the power dynamics were managed so well that it allowed for the companies to keep their way. Okay, what were the core needs? As we've been talking, Pixar had the need of keeping independence, of keeping a startup culture company where we all sit down, where we all command, where we all give ideas, where we all produce. Disney, on the other hand, it's a really hierarchical structure. There's a boss, and the boss says, and if the boss doesn't like it, then we have problems. But they had the need of still being relevant, of keep this relevance, of gain that market size. Give it in a big and broad overview. So what are the interventions that we decide? I think they were interventions that now we're seeing that other companies are doing it, and Netflix and WB are using it right now. So the first one is that we create a negotiation framework. How can you make sure that the coders, the animators, the heart and soul of Pixar feel good and feel listened? With a negotiation framework, with a way that people can express what they think. And this is not just a nice thing, like, oh, everybody will say what they think. It is also a way for Disney to gather information and to make a better and more compelling offer. So it's not just that, we're opening because voices need to be heard. Of course they need to be heard, but it is used in a strategic and financial manner. The more information that Disney had, the better the deal that could be, the better the offer, the better the way they structure it. And also, the more that, the Pixar employees express their feelings, their fears, the better they felt, the better this could be used. And now we're seeing this, whenever a bunch of franchises are being sold, like Harry Potter is being sold, and a lot of other, shows that are ongoing are being sold. How can these people that are being so creative keep their ideas, keep their word, their vision of these pieces of art? Because they are enormous pieces of art, and how can make sure that we do it? Second, it needs to be a strategic integration unit. It needs to be a way that we are coherent about what we do, and it needs to be a way to solve conflict, because conflicts will arise, problems will happen. That's a fact. But if you have a strategic way, of employees from both companies making sure that the problems are being solved and are being directed in a useful manner, then you're good. And this was the strategic leverage mapping, and this is like kind of a way to balance power in a more guerrilla way. How this was used, they leaked messages to the press that Disney was not going to be acquired, that Disney was not going to acquire Pixar. Pixar was playing around with Dreamcast. Pixar was moving other things to manage the power, and I think this is key and something that we're as we're lived in a more socialized and connected world where, if you say a word now, it's in Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, everywhere, we're going to see these more and more and more. The power dynamics can be moved just by a social media video, and they need to be strategically played. And that's what we created. And okay, evaluation and measurements. How could we know if these measurements and these tactics work? Because, it's nice to say them, but how could we actually know? First, in regards of a negotiation framework, we need to know if the conflicts that are happening are being solved, how many of them are being solved. How can we keep good track of the way and feel that they have? How's the company feeling? Also, how can you measure the creativity? The market will measure it. If you create a bad movie, people will hate it and they will not see it. If you create a good movie, then people will love it. So we have these as a couple of ways to measure it. Then the sustainability actions, we wanted to create ways for them. I created this. This looks awesome. Yeah. You see Wally over there. But yeah, there's ways that you can make these actions sustainable over time. internalizing this negotiation framework into the constitution of the company, into the main bracket of what determines this new acquisition. Institutionalizing the idea of a common problem-solving way. And the key takeaways is that mergers will keep happening. Negotiations are more important than ever in a world where AI can produce anything, you know? Negotiating, it's key. I don't know if I'm over the time, no?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, negotiations will be more important than everything. And yeah, thank you so much.